and get started. You guys can hear me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Perfect. So first I have a few housekeeping notes. I'm going to put the link to the feedback form in the chat box. I'll do it right now. So if you're logged in right now, we might have some stragglers. I'll put it in right now. I'll also put it in at the end. So let me come over here to the chat box, and I just put it in there. So all of you should have access to that. Please fill this out after today's session. I know it's very useful for presenters, but also for those of us who help plan these webinars. So please, it's pretty short and straightforward. Just take a few minutes and fill that out at the end. We appreciate it. Otherwise, let's go ahead and get started. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Samantha Bice. I'm the 2020 chair of the Teaching, Learning, and Technology Roundtable of the Pennsylvania Library Association. It's a mouthful. Our roundtable, like most of you, we realized that libraries have had to change many of our in-person services to virtual services for their patrons in light of the COVID-19 pandemic this past year. And things are still changing. So we decided it may be helpful to discuss some of the ways that different libraries have expanded their services to include these virtual options. So today's webinar is going to showcase some of these transitions. And our presenters are Sam Bardarik, she's the Business and Career Librarian at Chester County Library, and Allyson Wynn, who is the Electronic Resources Librarian at East Stroudsburg University. So we've got different types of libraries represented here too, so we hope it's really helpful. And I'm going to let Sam and Allyson take it from there.
Thanks, Sam. My name is Sam Bardarik with Chester County Library in Exton, and today we're just going to talk about kind of the experiences that we've had, that Allyson and I have had, just dealing with COVID and shutdown and all of those things. And we were talking about this beforehand, and it's pretty interesting where we align, even being in two different types of libraries, but also the points where our experiences are very different. So we'll talk about just identifying the stakeholder needs as this new, the shutdowns occurred, and just trying to figure out, okay, how can we still service our patrons, and transitioning to the remote services that we identified. Marketing and communication, so how we transition those to make sure that we can get the word out and keep people informed. And then in more recent weeks and months, transitioning back into a very different landscape for library services that are hybrid, in-person and virtual, and kind of the evaluation that we've done and the lessons that we've learned. So for stakeholder needs, Allyson, you want to talk about ESU?
Sure. So some of the main obvious stakeholders at a university are our students. So we've been really trying to stay student focused as much as we can. And one of the main issues that we've had is local students versus non-local. ESU has been fully virtual for the most part in the fall. And we plan on being that way in the spring as well. So getting books into the hands of students has been kind of a difficult situation, and it keeps changing. We are allowing students to check out books, but they're not allowed to go into our basement, for example. And this is a picture I have of our curriculum materials center where all the children's books are for the education majors. So for example, if an education major needs a picture book for a class or needs a textbook for a class, we've had to implement new procedures to allow them to still check these books out, but not go down into the basement area where they're shelved. So we have a procedure in place where they can contact either me or the library assistant in the CMC or our circulation department, and we'll go grab the book for them, check it out, and they can come pick it up at the library. And we've just also talked about starting a curbside pickup, which we really didn't have before. And we're gonna start that now. And another thing, what I've been doing with students, if they don't feel comfortable coming into the library or even just touching a library book that other people have touched, I've been really encouraging a lot of our education majors and other people to use our electronic resources and find books and other materials that are obviously not physical, so there wouldn't be any risk there of contracting COVID perhaps from touching the books or coming in contact with library staff. And it's also available both on and off campus. So if you're far away, you're hundreds of miles away, you can still access our library resources. So right now I'm trying to keep people interested in the library in a few different ways. And I think for us too, interlibrary loan was always big for us at the library. Being a college library, we can't have everything. No library has everything. So sharing resources was important. And I know that in the past, we had a lot more libraries participating in interlibrary loan, and that was something that we've had to kind of deal with. It's a reduction in the number of libraries participating in interlibrary loan. Some of the space considerations we have are very similar to what Sam is going through. We have building capacities, and we have one floor closed, and we have students who still are on campus, and we are allowing people to come in. But it's been very difficult to try to keep people from gathering together and wearing their masks, especially also with the staff reductions. Our staff has been cut quite a lot in the last year. We lost, I think, 5 people out of 15, so that's about a third of our staff. And again, shortages in absolutely everything. There's shortages from wipes for the counters and the supplies for cleaning to change if we have people paying fines. So that's always been difficult in our library. And I'm sure I'm going to let Sam talk about some of the similarities and differences with her stakeholders next.
Yeah, when we first started to go into lockdown in March, the libraries in our area, well, everything in our area just completely shut down. So we weren't even open, but we knew that we had public patrons who use the library, and it's essential to them, especially in a public. I mean, obviously in academic, students need the library. The public needs libraries as well, especially for people who are job searching and they don't have computers or internet access at home. And it's like, well, we're closed. How are we going to help? So that was very difficult, and it's still not something that we've really solved or that libraries have solved in general. It's a big issue. But we were trying to identify how we can reach out to them, or how just patrons in general. And we'll talk more about the methods that we used in a later slide. But yeah, interlibrary loan, that's still kind of an issue. I know there's something I've personally had on interlibrary loan, and just because a lot of the academic libraries have been closed that we would borrow from either aren't open or aren't lending, and that just varies. So there's just increased times that patrons have to wait for their materials. E-materials especially have been hit because there's such a high demand, and then with a lot of e-material companies just playing around with, you can only have one license, or you have to wait 3 months for brand new titles before you can get an additional license, and just trying to limit the amount of people that can have access to e-materials has been very frustrating. So on Overdrive and Libby, which is a big e-material app that we use in the public library, it's just, you'll see wait times of 67 weeks because we can only get one license, and just that issue conflating with COVID closure and everything being shut down, and everyone transitioning to e-materials has been very frustrating. Space considerations, when we started opening again, we at the library had ended up doing a plan or multiple plans. We would open it 25% capacity and 50% capacity, which is still where we're at now. Is we're just trying to limit people to 2 hours in the library total. We limit people to 1 hour on the computer. When we first opened up again back in July, I think, we only had computer seating. We weren't letting anyone sit in the library at all, but we've since opened up, since we're able to get clear panels to put in between seats at the service desks. It's been a totally different environment, and we're just trying to be as safe as possible and communicate that to patrons. And yeah, like Allyson said, shortages and everything. We're just constantly running out of wipes and hand sanitizer, and we have a plastic sheets that we put on the keyboards and the mouses for the public computers, and we switch them out between users, and we're just going through that a lot. And it's hard because it's like we we want to provide as clean a space as possible, especially since people, like I said, stakeholders who need to come into the use of the library and just don't have the access to a computer or the internet at home, and they're job searching or they're doing insurance or other very important things. And we're just trying to balance being able to give those resources, but also being safe for everyone, which is not an easy place to be in the middle of.
One shortage we were struggling with was a plexiglass shortage, because we really wanted to set up our reference office so we could have people in the office but still have the physical barrier there. And we asked several times, and they finally said, look, there is like a nationwide plexiglass shortage, and this project is not going to happen. And I'm like, okay, we'll go from there. So we had to adapt with that kind of a shortage. It's been really interesting.
Yeah. So with all that in mind, just trying to keep safety and closures and stakeholders, trying to balance everything, we ended up at the library setting up a blog, Stay Connected with Chesapeake Libraries, and we linked to it on our social media and on our website. And it became very active, especially March when we closed in April. We did a good job of, like everyone at the library did a good job of getting the word out there to the point that as of October 13th, when I took stats, we had almost 22,000 views on the blog. And we weren't just doing library material resources, although we were sharing that information. Like, here's the link to download the Libby app for e-materials. Here's all our databases and all the other stuff that you can access from home. But we were sharing community information as well, which was relevant to our public patrons. So the county business loans that are being offered, job help, community services. We were just blogging multiple times a day. We had multiple librarians who were posting from wherever they get their information and posting all that to the blog. And yeah, so 22,000 views and 7,300 unique visitors, over 503 blog posts. It's died down. We are still using the blog, but since we are open now and we have other channels that we can get information out, it's not being used quite as much. But again, like April was the highest blog views and visitors that we saw. And since we've been, and we had to transfer remote services also to just employees. We were just closed and didn't really know what was going on. So we weren't, but we were trying to work from home as much as possible. So at the library, we started using Slack a lot more so that we can communicate with each other. And we're still using that. That's been a fantastic tool. So just a chat tool in general to communicate between employees in different departments. And another thing was that we had to extend the due dates for people, because we didn't want people returning books, because there was really no one at the library to take the books and return them. So we just told them, keep them at home. We're going to be continuing to extend the due dates and your expiration dates. And so when we finally reopened, everyone's expiration date was like October 1st. So we got a huge slew of people having to renew, but we've had to be really flexible with that. And that's been the big thing for the past few months, is just being flexible and communicating. I'm just going to harp on those throughout this webinar, because those were the two most important things for people. We've more recently been doing virtual services, so especially after we reopened, but we in July for the library people to come in, but we haven't been doing any face-to-face workshops or programming, and we've transitioned all of that to Zoom. So we got Zoom licenses, and that's been that was a transition, just to do all of the programming virtually and getting the word out about that. But we did transfer that, and as well as one-on-one librarian help. So we have various services that we offer on a one-on-one basis, and that's all been transitioned to virtual services as well. We recently got LibCal, which we were planning to do regardless, even before COVID, but that's been really helpful because it has a lot of useful streamlined features for us. And it looks like ESU did LibCal as well.
Yeah, LibCal has been really important for us. We each have our schedules. We have 5 librarians, and each of us put our schedules up. So if students wanted to pick a particular librarian, they could, since we're all liaisons to certain departments on campus. But then if somebody wasn't really sure, they could just pick whoever was on during the time that they were available to talk to us. So that's been really great, and that's something we're definitely going to continue into the future. In terms of a web portal, we have a LibGuide that we made to talk about the changes that were going on. And we called it Spring 2020 because they told us we weren't supposed to put COVID on it because the university had their own COVID page and they didn't want us to get them confused with each other. So we just called ours Spring 2020, and then we just changed it to Fall 2020, and we'll keep changing the name of it as it changes. And as this keeps going and evolving, that's where we've been putting all the more important information, like how to check out books, how to return books. That was a big thing. People didn't even know that we were checking books out, and they still don't. So we have to continuously remind people that, yes, we're open. Yes, there are certain services going on. Here's what we can do for you. And again, being flexible. If somebody is I don't have an e-card, I can't get into the building, just let them in the building. If you know they're a student, you can look them up in the library catalog, find out that they're an active student, or in our other systems, find out they're active, let them in. As long as that doesn't affect the capacity of the building. A lot of our students are Twitter users, which is pretty unique to our school. They don't really use a lot of other social media outlets. So one of our librarians has been putting everything on Twitter. And I put a little screenshot here of when our chat service changed. We changed from a third-party thing that wasn't really working very well to LibGuides, and that's been working really great for us. So he would put out that information on Twitter as it came, and then as you can see, there are people who will like it and retweet it, and that kind of helps spread the word amongst our students about library services. And like Sam said, we had to start extending the due dates for everything. So we got a slew of emails at first being oh no, my book is due. And again, we're still getting them, but we have to remind them it's okay, get it to us when you can. If you're not local, you can mail it. Here's our mailing address. But we've definitely had to be more lenient about due dates. We don't get a ton of print circulating materials in the first place. But again, that was still something we needed to clarify to people to let them know that this was still available to them and how to check out and return books. So yeah, that was definitely something that was changing all the time. And again, Twitter has been a great way to kind of spread that information, and that LibGuide. And I think the LibGuide I didn't look recently, but I think I knew at the end of the spring semester, we had 2,000 or 3,000 views of that guide. So we know everybody was clicking on it to look. So that's kind of what our transition has looked like. And if we want to go to the next slide, I'm ready to talk about the next stuff.
Yeah, we've talked about the blog and the LibGuide were kind of definitely part of the marketing and communication, but we at the public library definitely utilized our newsletters and email lists a lot more heavily than we would normally have done. And the image on the screen right now is from the blog that we started, and this was from April 22nd. We posted about Ancestry.com now being available for free, because a lot of services that we use, third-party services, we're doing free extended periods and that sort of thing. So we definitely wanted to get the word out about that. And this particular one about Ancestry was by far the most popular blog post as far as views. But we talked about career services, business assistance, another service like Ancestry that was allowing remote from home and free access was a nonprofit funding information network that we normally provide, that's normally only available in the library, but they had a way to get it for a limited time from home. Yeah, and The social media that we did was, I'll talk about this, well, yeah. So most of our users are on Facebook, and we get a lot. We do have Twitter and Instagram as well, but most of our views and everything are on Facebook. And this was one of their most popular views after we reopened, or I guess in June. Well, we reopened to staff in June. Like, it was a very iterative reopening process, and at that point we were only doing curbside pickups, which I'll talk about in a second. But we posted this kind of image collage of all the thousands of returns that we were getting, and this is by far our most popular post. You can see it reached almost 10,000 people and had 2,000 engagements on it, and it was just an update about what we were doing at the library. So that was interesting. And then our second most popular post was this video of how to do curbside pickup, which people are definitely still using, and we're using, especially when we weren't open, and that was the only way to pick up holds that people had placed, or to return books. So this was June 30th, and over 2,000 curbside pickups just as of a few weeks that we were doing it. But a lot of people watched this video, and it's a very popular service. But like Allyson said, they're still getting calls. If the library is still even open, we're still getting those calls too, and we've been open for several months now. But just because no matter how much marketing and communication you do, and it does help, you're still going to get people who kind of fall between the cracks, and just having a lot of patience and being flexible is really important.
Yeah, we never closed. We were open all through. We've been open all through March, all through the summer. And yes, we have again, this was in Facebook with our operating hours, and this was during March. So again, we let people know that all hours were subject to change, and everybody needed an e-card to get in. And we don't have a blog or a newsletter or anything like that. So we were really relying on either the social media or the website, or for example, the top of our website, there's a little area where we can put up emergency messages. And the first emergency message was written by administration for us, and I wasn't really allowed to change it. And a lot of the information was incorrect, but for reasons, I left it. And later on, I've been changing it as things change, and I'm trying to make it as brief as possible. The first message was really, really long, and you had to, where it says read more, you had to click, and there would be half a page worth of stuff. And that just wasn't working. So we kind of transitioned a lot of that information over to that LibGuide, which is much more helpful and a little bit better organized than just a big wall of text. So if you have somebody who's the website administrator, they're going to be a really important person to help you with getting the messages out to people. And yeah, we've been open since March, and people still don't know that we're open. So it's like an ongoing struggle.
We've talked about these items a little bit, but at least at the public library, when we did start accepting those return books, those thousands of return books, we instituted a 72-hour quarantine period that we are still doing just to be extra safe. That's what we're using our meeting rooms for, since we're not doing in-person programming. And we get a lot of questions about that because we don't check it in. So it's not reflected on the patron's account for 3 or 4 days until after they return it, and that's caused we've been trying to get the word out as much as possible. We get a lot of phone calls, but once we explain it, people have been generally pretty understanding. We're like, yes, we'll backdate it 4 days once we do check it in, and there will be no fines, and that's what people are most concerned about. So as long as we're clear about that, it's okay. But yeah, we are definitely quarantining things. We did institute the curbside pickup since that was the only way to pick up books for a while. We are open now for people to come into the service desk to pick up their any holds that they have, but still not to check in to return books. That still has to be done outside. So just so that they can go into quarantine. We also, our checkout desk instituted contactless self-checkout because we had a mobile app before. So they added a feature to that where people, patrons can scan the barcode and they're already logged in on the mobile app to their account, and they can just check things out, so they don't have to go up to the desk and have someone else handle the books that they want to check out. And previously the only way to renew your library card was to come in person. And that's still an option for people, especially since the service desks, at least at the Exton Library, do have the plexiglass. But we added an option to be able to do that on the mobile app. Since we have to like verify your address and that sort of thing, they can just take pictures of an ID and a piece of mail on the mobile app, and they can do it from home now, which has been very popular to the point that it's, when we started it, there were like 2-week processing delays to renew the card because so many people were using it. It just goes to show that those services are in demand, and people were using them from home, which was good. Yeah, we're continuing the Zoom programming, Zoom appointments. We've gotten ourselves more familiar and organized with using LibCal. That's been great. And right now we're at 50% occupancy. I kind of mentioned this before. And just trying to limit people to, at first it was 30-minute browsing, just to, exactly what book you want, you come in and you check out and you leave. But now we are allowing people to study at the desk, because we had so many people when we weren't allowing it being like, I have my laptop, I need the internet, I have to, do an assignment or something. It's just like, well, for safety at that point, we weren't allowing it, but we are now. We did allow laptop lending, but they could only use it on the premises in the parking lot, because our Wi-Fi extended out into the parking lot. So that was something, you can still do that, but since we've opened up our computer usage and space for people to bring their own laptops, that I don't think that's quite as popular as it was, but that was something we were doing as well. Just, again, trying to identify those patron needs and do what we can as safely as possible. And there's just been, now that I'm talking about it like in full, just, wow, the past few months have been like 8 years of transitions. It's been intense. And we modified our hours briefly as well. We're still not open. We used to be open all 7 days a week. We're still not open on Sundays. At first we were open just until 5 p.m. Now we're open until 9 p.m. like we usually were during the week. So we're back to our normal Monday through Saturday hours, just not Sundays at this point.
I was going to say, we do quarantine our items still, but we don't have nearly as many checkouts as you do. So it might be 1 cart of books that is quarantined. So it's not a lot for us to do that. We haven't had really any complaints about things not being available due to quarantine or anything like that. So that's not a huge issue for us. The curbside pickup has been a little bit of a challenge. Our students, we have been checking things out for students. Like if they called and said, hey, I want this book, we'd check it out to their account and put it on a table that's kind of in our lobby area. So there would be no physical contact with the other person. And that's kind of bothered a few people. So I've been trying to communicate that with people, like, we're not discouraging you from coming in. It's just, this is our procedure for placing the book in the pickup area. So we're not breathing on each other. It's a safety issue. It's not a personal thing. You're welcome to come in the library as long as the capacity is low enough. Once you pick up your book and study, do whatever you need to do. We don't have time limits for people, just because it's college, and college kids will camp out all day in the library if they don't have another place to study, which a lot of them don't. So trying to humanize a lot of the procedures has been kind of difficult, because a library is such a personal place. And then to all of a sudden have like contactless pickup and curbside pickup has been kind of difficult for our students, because they really, really want to be on campus, and it's difficult for them to not have personal contact with us. The other things that are kind of continuing as well, like I said, are the Zoom appointments. Those have been working really well through LibCal, and we'll probably keep doing that, because students have the freedom to choose what works for them in terms of being able to meet with a librarian. I think that's really helpful to keep going. And then they are going to be bringing more students on campus next semester, they told us. So we're not really sure what that means for occupancy or time limits. We're not really sure with the staffing that we have, how we're going to enforce people not sitting next to each other. There's a lot of places where people can kind of tuck themselves into a corner and hide, and we can't see them. So these are all challenges that we're gonna come up against in the spring. I think they're gonna like triple or quadruple the amount of students who are on campus. So it's going to be an interesting transition there, but hopefully we'll be able to figure that out. Again, have to be 100% flexible all the time. We can't say, oh, we've always done it this way, let's just keep doing it. We have to constantly be changing, and some people have really had a difficult time with that. So if they're told, hey, we have to do this thing now, they get a little bit like, well, we never did that before. Well, those were the before times. And these are these times. So now we have to just roll with it and see what happens. So I'm interested to see what happens when we have more people on campus next semester, because with that staffing issue, I don't know how we're going to enforce the masking.
Yeah. That's been an issue for us as well. And we have, it's our policy that you have to wear a mask covering your mouth and nose at all times in the library. So we just allow food and drinks. And that's been, it's basically feels kind of like that's our job now, is just to tell people to pull their masks up, which is frustrating. We have signs everywhere. There's a huge sign that when you, no, we have them on the tables. We have huge sign when you come in. We have an announcement going at least every hour telling people, and people will still not do it, which is frustrating. The biggest thing is it going down below your nose. It's like, yes, you do have to put it above your nose. We've definitely had people who were a few people who are angry about it. Most people are okay, and they're perfectly willing to pull their mask up, but it's just like, this is for the safety of everyone, please comply. But that's still an issue that we are we really don't know, because people don't read signs or don't think that it applies to them, and it can be frustrating.
Yeah, I kind of liken it to working when I worked in retail, and like there's a lot of people who come in and they don't read the signs that you have up all over the place, and it's very difficult to try to get people to work together to do things for the greater good. I don't know how else to explain it, but yeah, it's been an interesting experience.
And it doesn't help that we're strict about that, but if you go into other areas of society, restaurants are open and masks aren't required even inside. And
exactly.
When they get in, they're like, well, why are you requiring it when no one else does? And it's like, well,
yeah, that's what we've had trouble with too, because we have a cafe in the library, but it's been closed for obvious reasons. And we're allowing people to bring in drinks, and some people bring in food, but then we'll have a patron will come in and say, well, I was in this day and I saw somebody with their mask off. Why are you not enforcing the mask rules? So we've had to do, still kind of early for me, the word triage. Yeah. Like where you've got to email everybody and be like, no, we're not relaxing the mask rules. People are human. They need to eat. They need to drink. If they take their mask off for 2 minutes to take a drink, we're okay with that.
Yeah, we try to tell people we're a smaller building and different needs from students versus public patrons, but we have picnic tables outside. We're just like, if you need to eat and drink, just step outside for a minute, because it's inside that it spreads so much more quickly.
That's a really good idea. I didn't even think about that, because we do have a patio area out front with chairs. That could be an option. If you need to go out and have lunch.
Yeah,
you're welcome, as long as the weather's nice, and it still is. So
yeah, it's still spring outside in November. Yeah. Yeah, so just to kind of sum up here, the virtual programming has been going very well. I'm sure there are people that we're missing, and there's always that technology gap that can be very difficult, but we have tried to convert everything as possible to virtual programming, and we are getting people attending that way, so that's been good. And it's good because we can get more people as well. It can expand it a little bit to other than just people who happen to live in the immediate area. So that's been going smoothly, and a lot of librarians are doing different virtual programming. We're also able to work from home as much as possible. We have a specific shift on whatever service desk we're assigned to. So that's been, and we've had to transition to being able to remote in on our computers, that sort of thing. But we've gotten Google Drive documents in place to kind of help with that. And a remote VNC, is that what it's called? Virtual VPN. That's what it is. Those are the letters I'm looking for.
Yes.
So we have a virtual private network that our IT department was able to set up so that we can remote in and access like the network drives that we usually could only access from on site. The Slack is able to help us chat and on an immediate basis, regardless of where people currently are, even in the building. So it's made chat between service desks easier, especially if we have patrons who kind of want to abuse the amount of time that we give them, or the amount of time that we give them on the computers. Though we have 2 computer labs, and someone will go and ask for a guest at one computer lab, and ask for a guest pass and use up their hour, and then try to do the same thing at the other computer lab. But we have Slack and we talk to each other, so we can catch that when it happens, and limit the spread and the amount of time that people spend in the library. But again, like you said, like you said, Allyson, it's just really hard to monitor, because we don't always know when someone came in. It's just impossible to say, okay, yeah, that person's been here for 2 hours and 15 minutes, but someone else has been there for 4, and we just we asked the first person to leave, but we didn't realize that the other person has been there for so long, especially if they move around the library. It's just things fall through the cracks, and it can be very difficult to try to be consistent and apply the policies consistently throughout. Yeah, but we're just trying to do the best communication that we can and use all the avenues as possible.
Yeah, working from home has been interesting because with the 5 of us, we've tried to make the schedule so that there's always one person in the building, librarian-wise, and then somebody is at home doing the virtual reference. So like tonight, we have somebody who's out. So I worked this morning, and I'm going to take like a little 2-hour break in the middle, and then I'm going to have to work virtually from home tonight, like on the reference desk. Even though we don't have a physical desk, we haven't had a physical desk in a long time. We still call it, who's on the desk tonight. Yep. So like we mostly communicate over a Facebook group, me and my colleagues. So we'll coordinate together, like if we have to cover anything. I haven't really done a lot of VPNing for my house myself, because most of the stuff I have is, like you said, on a shared drive or in my email or somewhere else that I can log into. So that really hasn't been too much of a problem. And programming, we haven't really done any programming because that's not really one of our things that we do much at an academic library, especially ours. But yeah, it's been an interesting experience, and I do think there's a lot of positives that have come out of it, like some things that we figured out that work really well for our students, and others that just don't. And the one thing is definitely the staffing. I don't know how we're going to do it next semester with more people, more students coming in, and the amount of staff we have. It's going to be really hard, but again, got to be flexible. Try to figure it out, and ask for help if you need help. Like if I know I have a good support system now in administration that I can ask them, bring up my concerns and say, look, this is the issue we're having. How can you help me with it? And that's really helpful as well.
Yeah. We have at least one question in the Q&A. What kind of virtual programs have been most successful for you? So we have so many different librarians doing programming. I'm not sure like what they would answer. I primarily cover the business and career related programs, and we did a business panel a couple months ago where we contacted we ended up getting 3 local small business owners to talk about their experiences, starting up their business, what they encountered, how they determined like, okay, I have a business product or something that I can sell or the service that I can offer, what their lessons learned were for patrons and attendees who were interested in starting up their own business. And that was very successful. The three panelists that we had were really, really good. And they were all able to offer a lot of different perspectives, varied perspectives. Most of them had been in business for at least a few years, some of them a few decades. So we got a wide range of perspectives and a lot of good discussion and questions with the audience. So that was very successful.
I was just going to look at the rest of the chat. I see SHU has a lot of student Twitter users as well. Yeah, it's interesting because I've never would have thought that students are big Twitter users at all, but I guess they are. Jeffrey says, it's amazing. We're still getting calls from people who don't know that we're open. And we've been open to the public since August 3rd. Yeah. And you can, like we said, you can have all the signs up. You can put everything on social media. You can send it in a newsletter and you can do everything you can. And you're still going to have a few people who don't see it. But I know at least at our library, we're very happy to have you call us and we'll answer any questions that you have about it. Veronica says we're quarantining for a full week. Is that a public or a academic? I don't know if you can unmute yourself. And yeah, SHU also says this has been a fully face-to-face semester. Mask policing has been one of our biggest issues, or our biggest issue. We gave up on enforcing social distancing since we have no way of knowing who is a roommate. That's what we're dealing with as well. People are like, well, we live together. Okay, but there's other people in the building that don't live with you that, you have to keep your distance from them and you have to keep your mask on, even though you live with the person that you're coming in the building with. You have to think of other people who are here.
It's the same thing at it's the same thing at the public library, because we used to have a lot of group study areas and we're just like, it's one person per table now, but we get people who come in and, they say they live in the same household. A lot of times it's kind of, we're iffy on that. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's your decision. And something we struggle with is like, yeah, that's your decision and it's kind of out of our hands at this point, but we have to think about the other patrons as well. And that can be really difficult. There was another point I was going to make, but at the same time, we get a lot of people who come in and they have some kind of special need and they have an assistant with them, and it's like we can't ethically separate you or reasonably separate you, so we make those exceptions, and so it's just a constant balancing act between what exceptions do we make and what don't we, and which and making sure that whatever line we set, we have to be as equitable as possible, especially legally, which is something we have to consider for the public library purposes, at least.
Yeah, we're a public university, so we kind of have the same issues. Like if we have somebody from the public who says they want to come in and say, look at the archives, that's been a thing too. So we're letting them come in, and I have them scheduled with the archivist to come in and look at things. So we know that they're coming, they can't just walk in.
Yeah.
That's another communication thing. And I was just going to answer the one that says, with the number of COVID cases rising, are you looking at what you'll change with your current services? I think as the cases rise and the science kind of changes, that's definitely guiding how we're dealing with it, and like how I'm dealing with myself personally in my own office, because our building is really old, and I'm sure like a lot of other libraries are dealing with this too, is that like your library is old, you have an old HVAC system, and then you have students all over the building who are constantly being reminded to take their masks and pull them up is kind of a little bit disturbing to me. So like really trying to take care of yourself is something that I've been trying to emphasize to people. Like you can control what you do. And it's hard to worry about the other people. Current services that we might change are probably going to be like the in-person ability for people to come in and and stay for hours on end. I'm thinking we're probably going to have to change that, but again, I'm not in that department, so it's not my call. But it's going to be interesting to see how they deal with that service, at least.
Yeah, we just had a meeting yesterday to discuss this very question, and mostly it was trying to figure out how to more equally enforce the time suggestions that we have. They're not even policies for the 2-hour and the 1-hour time limits that I mentioned. And so we were talking about things like for the tables that we do have available, trying to get some kind of reservation system going, which is not easy when you can just walk up to a table. So we don't have clear answers, but I think we're trying to get some kind of system in place for that so that we can more easily monitor how long someone has been in the library and be like, okay, you know, we have the signs, you had to check in with us before you started using the table, so you knew going in what the recommendation was. We have to ask you to, for safety, you know, come back tomorrow to use the space, that sort of thing. And just really to limit the amount of time people are spending in the library for safety, and also to make it more equitable.
I see somebody said, what about students doing group work? We do have, our library, like I said, it's an older building from the 70s, so we really don't have like any group study rooms. We have one that used to be a reference office that we transitioned into a group study room, and we've had, we allow like one person at a time, a couple people at a time, I think, to go in there. But again, that's a constant issue with having them taking their masks off in there. Just because you're in that enclosed room doesn't mean that the HVAC system isn't circulating the air from the entire library in there. So that's also been difficult. And the maintenance has actually removed a lot of the chairs from all the tables. So it would be kind of hard for students to do any group work unless they physically lug all the furniture around now to do that. And we've actually had students do that, where they find the pile of chairs and try to take chairs and tables down to make a group, and we have to like tell them to stop, just because of space limitations and that kind of thing. So that's been kind of difficult.
Question, how popular is virtual reference? This is done at your public library. So we don't have a chat virtual reference. The way that people would ask questions at the ref desk is either by coming up, by calling, or by emailing us. And by far, I think the most, we get phone calls. So people can contact us in one of those ways. And when we were closed, we did get a lot of emails, and we had people staffing the emails from home during our normal hours that we would have done it if we were open. We do have the virtual one-on-ones. So I do the business and career one-on-ones, and I have an appointment system set up, and I get a lot of referrals from local organizations like SCORE, which is a business mentorship organization, and they've always referred people to me. So the flow isn't really different. It's just that when they contact me, I'm like, okay, I'll set up a Zoom meeting rather than setting up a face-to-face meeting, and that's been perfectly fine.
Yeah, our virtual reference has been popular from the beginning. So we mostly just had chat before we did the Zoom, but now with the Zoom presentation, or the Zoom ability to meet that way, has been really popular, especially with certain librarians who are more into the like the learning and instruction types of people. They get scheduled a lot more than I do. I've maybe had one or two people schedule with me because I'm kind of in the background. I do the website, electronic resources, so I'm not as public facing as other librarians. But again, it's become so popular that we're going to continue with it even after this is all over. So yeah.
See, Kelly said that they settled on enforcing masks strictly, but letting students sit near each other if they choose. It's not ideal, but there's only so much you can do. Study rooms with display screens help, since they're all on the same page without being each other's space. Yeah. And then Karen said we've removed chairs, but they still move them. Yeah, we get that at the public library. We had like stacks of chairs set off into the side behind a staff-only area, and somehow they ended up at the group study or the group area. It's like, no, we need to put those back.
It's hard because, like, depending on what state you're, I mean, we're all in Pennsylvania, but like you're allowed to have gatherings of certain sizes, but the library is not really, it's kind of like in a strange area, I guess. It's not like a gathering place, but it's also not like a restaurant, and it's very difficult to try to enforce those rules inside of a library. And like I said, we had the same thing where we have like piles of the regular hard chairs and soft chairs. And we found people like trying to take down the big soft chairs, and we're like, no, please stop. And Kelly, yes, we at our library have 2 staff people who make the rounds every hour. They do a count every hour to make sure that the capacity is low. And then we do a count every 2 hours to make sure people are wearing their masks. So it's happening every hour. People are going around our staff and checking. And I've started to have them mark down how many times they tell people to pull their masks up. I think that's going to be important for next semester to let our administration know, like, okay, you're bringing in more students, but here's the problem. You know, I have 2 staff people, and they're spending hours a day telling the exact same people to pull their masks up. Like, how do we deal with this? So I like to try to have that data to back up like how we're going to be changing that in the future.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
And we
Definitely.
do rounds as well. We've always done rounds just from the reference desk to even before COVID, just to say, okay, you know, if we see people among the stacks, like, do you need help, that sort of thing. And we do that every 30. We try to do it 30 to 60 minutes, every 30 to 60 minutes, just depending on how busy we get at the desk. So we've just added the mask monitoring to the normal rounds that we do.
Yeah, Karen says, we want students to do what they need to do to be successful, including working together, but they're not as conscious of being safe as they are as staff. Yeah, I think some of them think that they can get away with it and we're not going to catch them. And that's what gets me is the multiple times of telling people to put your mask up. And that's starting to really wear on us.
It's just strange how, like, when people see that they have an authority figure, they're like, oh, we don't actually have to do anything because they'll just tell us to do it and then we'll do it. It's a strange dynamic.
Yes. And adults, we do have some adults who feel the same way. For the most part, like, I have noticed that the majority of our employees on campus are wearing their masks. We don't have a lot of people on campus in terms of staff, but the ones that I have seen are all wearing their masks, and we're all very concerned for ourselves and for the students. And I'm not really sure how to communicate that anymore to them. Yeah, I wish we could do something like with the warnings, and I'm wondering if we'll have to do that next semester. That might be something that needs to be done. I think we have like 4 minutes left. Does anybody have any other questions? So it looks like we're all kind of struggling with the same issues, no matter what kind of library that we're in. That's kind of what Sam and I were talking about when making this presentation. Like, even though we're 2 totally different libraries, we still are struggling with the same issues.
Wait a minute for questions, but otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. I hope it was helpful to let you know that you're not alone with whatever issues you're dealing with. But yeah, if you have any questions, we're here.
Before people start logging off, I do want to send just one more time in the chat box. There's the link to the feedback form.